We targeted Tractor Supply first. They lost $3 billion in market cap. John Deere was next. They lost $10 billion.
Well, if that clip seemed interesting to you, you're going to love the conversation with Robby Starbuck. I'm Gideon Askowitz, and this is 7 Minute Expert. Thank you, Mr. Starbuck, for agreeing to come on the podcast. We're very excited to have you. So, as some of you, I'm sure, are aware, Mr. Starbuck has been very involved in combating DEI. He produced an excellent movie called The War on Children, which I encourage you to all check out. And since then, he's been doing a lot of work on exposing different companies and their policies against DEI. He draws a stark contrast between DEI and general racism, which we all generally abhor. And he just wants to focus on remedying these policies which cause discord in our society. So how did you first get involved in fighting against DEI?
Well, I'm a dad, and with my oldest kid who's 16, I saw already when she was in elementary school, DEI starting to creep its way in because she was in a private school at the time, and the school brought in a white privilege speaker without telling any of the parents. We found out afterwards. And when we found out afterwards, I joked with my daughter. I was like, well, they had told the kids, don't sit together if you're all white because it might make minorities uncomfortable. You need to invite them to your table. And I said, well, you're going to have to go to your friends tomorrow and you're going to have to tell them, look, I'll be your token minority anytime you need one because technically she's Latino since her dad's Cuban, right? And it's like, this is how absurd it is. I knew these kids since they were like toddlers, and all these kids didn't have an ounce of racism in them. They never looked at each other as a race or anything like that. Like they were just friends. These kids, they had never thought of each other like. And so I saw how DEI introduces racism. It introduces the idea that we should separate each other into immutable characteristics. And I said, what does that remind me of? It reminds me of what the civil rights movement fought against, right? We should be looking at each other by our merit and the content of our character, and sort of how we treat each other. And that I knew was going to be the enemy of a lot of good things that we value as a society. So when I saw it enter corporate America, I said, okay, we've got to do what we can to stop this. And so we carefully analyzed how it came to be the behemoth that it really was, if we looked at it objectively last year. And I said, the Overton window shifted so wildly after George Floyd because activists were able to get in there as the heads of DEI departments. And the way to peel this back is to do essentially the exact opposite of what they did. And the best way to do that was to start by targeting the companies that have largely conservative consumers and make their consumers aware of the policies these companies had adopted, because I knew I had influence with those customers. And so that was the test. We tested that theory and it worked. We targeted Tractor Supply first. They lost $3 billion in market cap. John Deere was next. They lost $10 billion. And then Harley Davidson, they held out the longest and they are still feeling the pain today. They just had their most recent earnings report. I think it said they lost 60% of U.S. sales year over year. That is not something companies survive and continue to be anything resembling what they used to be, right? So they have choices to make. If I were them, I'd fire my CEO very quickly and put somebody in who understands the Harley brand. But at the end of the day, we proved our point, right? So companies started listening then and they were like, okay, we don't want to be the next one. What is it you have a problem with? And we would bring them all the things we found about them and they'd go, okay, how about this? What about a story about us changing? And ultimately those stories became very successful. And, those companies have actually reaped some benefits from it. When I look at the stock performance of the companies that have announced via me that they're dropping these policies, these are companies where their stock seems to go up every time I announce that these companies are dropping DEI. So the market has rewarded it because functionally, I think they understand a lot of these DEI programs, they actually violated existing civil rights laws. When you have programs explicitly designed to only hire Latinos or only hire Black folks, that's racist towards the people that it's not including, right? And the irony in that is it's done under the banner of being inclusive. So, everything about the term diversity, inclusion does not mean what it pretends to mean. It's not the definition we all grew up thinking these words meant. These are new definitions, political definitions, because DEI is a Trojan horse for left-wing policy. And equity is really the term that makes that clear, because equity is a Marxist term, the idea that we're going to artificially look at this group and say, they're excellent. This other group's here, they're not as good. And we're going to just artificially shift them up to here because that's fair. And so what they don't think about is that the people who are at that excellent level initially, they work very hard to get here. They made a lot of sacrifices. If you artificially push everybody up, what is their motivating factor to stay here and be excellent? They don't have one. Because if they know they're going to be equal with everybody, they're just going to take their foot off the gas pedal, and suddenly everything starts to slowly, dramatically decline. And that's how you lose innovation in a country. It's how you lose progress in a country. It's how you become second rate, third rate, and other companies, superpowers jump you in line and they become the dominant forces in the world. That doesn't just have economic implications. It has national security implications. It has every implication you can imagine. And so DEI is the enemy of American excellence. And now, I won't lie, we were really swimming upstream against it because public sentiment was actually in favor of DEI when I started this. Now we've shifted it in such a way that people better understand the problem with DEI. And I would make a bet that by next year, this will be close to an 80-20 issue where 80% of the country will look at DEI and say, oh, that's racism, and you'll always have 20% of people who just, they, for whatever reason, adopt some crazy policy. But I think we will turn things dramatically in our favor in that respect. And, this administration's doing a hell of a job helping me out.
So what I wanted to pull the thread on, so you're focused very much on the corporate world, but what we've seen, and certainly my experience, has been that a lot of these policies flow up from the university level, right? DEI is an offshoot of intersectionality, offshoot of critical race theory, and these theories have been developed and then expounded upon. So how could a college student begin to combat these issues within the university? And then how could they help you uncover DEI within the university? And then that affects, for example, I receive many, many programs that are through my college. There are the Black Affinity Group for applying for a job at Blackstone at different corporations. I'm explicitly excluded from all these opportunities that my university offers. And I know that I'm not the only college student. So how could we help you expose these issues so that we don't get discriminated against, so that everything is actually fair?
Yeah, so there's a number of things you can do. Okay, you're definitely not helpless. You live in the best time ever to take action on this. So I would say first thing is collect evidence. That's very important because once these people realize that somebody's collected evidence, they go and try to wipe it. So collect evidence. Make sure you do that on the front end. You want evidence of everything they've done that violates the law because most of this is illegal. And secondarily, you're going to want to identify good vectors for getting the information out. I love folks, but if you have 200 followers online, you're probably not the best vector to get it out to a wide audience. What you're going to want to do is, yes, you can put it out as well, but you need to find folks that are in independent media with large followings, send them messages with the evidence, with the story. And if you send it to 10 of them, 15 of them, like somebody's going to bite, right? And if it's a good story, and they're going to go and get the information out there, verify it, and make sure the public is aware of it. You get that in the hands of millions of people, you're going to start to change things, right? Secondary part of that is contact groups like America First Legal and get litigious. If you're being discriminated against at the college level, do not be afraid of filing a lawsuit. A lot of these universities have multi-billion-dollar endowments, and they certainly can afford to settle, in cases where they've done wrong and make it hurt. Those settlements should be as big as you can get them to be, because ultimately that's how they learn the lesson and how they understand, okay, in the future, we don't want to do this, and encourage your peers to do the same. Another thing that is very important is organizing like-minded students. So organize those like-minded students to stand up to this together. The left does a good job of putting pressure on the admin at universities. Take some of their tactics, get letters from people and from alumni, from donors, and get them to put pressure on the dean of your school or on the faculty there, on the board. Let them know that there's going to be a financial consequence to their continued behavior. And I think that that's very important. Another thing too is look at ways they may be violating the law that you can report to the federal government, because the DOJ is looking at these universities and looking at how they violated the law. That could be a very good sort of way to get back at them and to get fairness back in universities.
Okay. So based on what you're saying, I feel called to create another group now, Students Against DEI. I will amass those letters from different students across the country, and then we'll send them to the DOJ and to direct them to contact America First Legal, which is Stephen Miller's group. I think that would be great. And we'd continue maybe to reach out to people like you. As you can all see, Mr. Starbuck was very responsive. This is a small podcast, I have a small Twitter presence, and he responds to solicitations. So if you have a serious story, reach out to him. I want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. My goal is to not ever keep anybody's time. You're amazing for the work that you're doing, and we are going to continue to cheer for you. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And, I get a lot of, emails for smaller podcasts, and I typically say no, but every once in a while you'll see one where it's like, you can tell the person really cares. And that's why I said yes, because I could tell you cared for the right reasons. It seemed like to me, and I've been a pretty good judge of character in my life. And so I said, you got to do things like like this build people up, right? Like we need another generation to come up and be leaders. I'm not going to be here forever. There's going to
You're
have to
young.
be
You're a young guy.
I showed you the gray hairs before we started. Okay.
You did.
There's going to have to be another generation that comes up and takes reins and really makes change happen. We don't want to be like the Mitch McConnells of the world. We don't want to overstay and try to hold on to things too long. And then you create a bunch of problems, right? So keep it up. Don't give up. Build up that following, make good things happen and fight. That's what Trump says.
All right, will do. And I'll try to stay in touch. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, and Godspeed.
Thank you, you too.
Well, folks, we've reached the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Mr. Starbuck. If you liked the conversation, please make sure to like and subscribe and share the episode with your friends. I'm Gideon Askowitz, and this is 7 Minute Expert.